The highly anticipated character Kafka has finally dropped in Honkai Star Rail, and she is the mother of damage over time and the mommy for many, and whether you take that literally or in another way is up to you. Hi there, my name is Blossums, and today we'll be going over our Kafka guide, how you're going to want to build her via her relics and her light cones, as well as some alternatives, because let's be real, not everybody has the best versions of what is technically the best for her. We'll also be talking a little bit about her gameplay and some aspects to it that I just don't see a lot of people talking about, as well as some good team compositions and team philosophies to be going with whenever you are building your teams with Kafka in them. So we got quite a bit to cover. Let's go ahead and talk about Kafka. So how does Kafka work? What's her kit all about? Well, I mentioned she's the mother of damage over time, and I mean that quite literally. She's the first character we've gotten that really enables the playstyle of utilizing damage over time in order to actually win in your battles. And she accomplishes this in a few ways. First up, we'll talk about her skill. Her skill deals lightning damage to a single target and the adjacent targets next to it based off of her attack, and then it also immediately activates the current damage over times on the enemy, dealing damage equal to a percentage of their original damage. So if you have wind shear or bleed or you have shock on them, then this skill is actually going to activate that effect. She also has her ultimate, Twilight Twirl, and this deals lightning damage based off of her attack with a 100% base chance for enemies hit to become shocked and immediately take damage from their current shock state equal to 92% of its original damage. So if you already have shock stacks on them, it is going to activate those, and that shock lasts for 2 turns. And while shocked enemies receive lightning damage over time equal to scaling percentage of Kafka's attack at the beginning of each turn. Now, this does evolve through some of the traces on the outside here, namely when the ultimate is used here on the bonus ability Torture. When the ultimate is used, enemy targets will now receive damage immediately from all currently applied DOT sources instead of just receiving damage immediately from the currently applied shock state. So the ultimate ability at base only activates the shocked element on all of the enemies, but whenever you get this trace, then it activates all of them, same as the skill. So if you have wind shear, bleed, etc., it's going to activate those as well, just accumulating those damage over times and allowing them to deal even more damage throughout the course of the battle. Then next up is probably one of the most important aspects to Kafka that I just don't see talked about enough, and that is the talent for Kafka. After an ally of Kafka's uses basic attack on an enemy, Kafka immediately launches one follow-up attack and deals lightning damage equal to a percentage of her attack to that target with a 100% base chance to inflict shock equivalent to that applied by her ultimate to the attacked enemy target for 2 turns. This effect can only be triggered 1 time per turn. And I say this is super underrated, mostly because this fills in a lot of gaps for your team. This is, of course, very good for the damage over time playstyle. You get some shock off of this, allows you to deal some extra damage, but the real value in this that I think makes Kafka an insane character is the fact that almost every turn rotation, you are going to be using a normal attack of some kind just for your skill point management, and that means you're almost always going to be utilizing this talent. And when you are losing damage by using that normal attack in order to retain your skill points, now you can offset the downside to having to use that normal attack for that skill point with Kafka's talent here, allowing her to deal some additional damage. So realistically, it's just so helpful for the team. I think a lot of people downplay this, and I think this is an amazing part of her kit, allowing her to make up for what is essentially your healer always doing a normal attack and allow them to actually provide some extra damage because of this talent is invaluable in my opinion, and I really like this aspect to her. And that's essentially the core of her kit. Apply shock and activate your other damage over times via your elemental skill or your elemental burst. Her normal attack doesn't really do anything special. It's just a pretty standard normal attack, but as you can see, she's heavily focused on damage over time and is able to apply it and activate other damage over times, allowing you to deal some really massive damage via those damage over times or those dots. There are some other bonus abilities here. One of them is Thorns. Essentially, the base chance for target enemies to get shocked by ultimate, the technique, or the talent triggered follow-up attack increases by 30%. So that just increases your effect hit rate, essentially allowing you to make sure that you're actually applying that shock in case they resist it or something. And then she also has another one that if an enemy is defeated while they have shock on them, Kafka additionally regenerates 5 energy. Now, this is extra important to think about because this doesn't say anywhere that Kafka has to be the one that kills them, or the shock has to be the one that kills them. They just have to have shock on them. So if you are killing a bunch of fodder and they have shock on them, then she's going to get 5 energy for each of those fodder that you annihilate. So that is very nice. And I also forgot to go over the technique here. Nothing too crazy there, just immediately attacks all enemies within a set range after entering battle, deals lightning damage equal to 50% of her attack to all enemies with a 100% base chance to inflict shock equivalent to that applied by her ultimate on every enemy target for 2 turns. So yeah, you just get shock for free essentially at the start of the battle and deal some lightning damage, allowing you to get shock off the hop, which is quite nice. Moving forward, let's talk about light cones for Kafka, and I'm here in the databank because I don't have the best light cones for Kafka, and there are some other ones that I don't have that are very good as well. Of course, the best light cone for Kafka is going to be your signature light cone, the one on the light cone banner right now. This one's just insane, especially because it gives her speed. Speed is insanely important for Kafka, allowing you to apply more of that damage over time and activate more of your damage over times more often, and allowing you to get that talent off more often than you are going to really want speed. The more speed, the better. So the fact that this light cone gives you some speed is quite nice and increases your damage. Of course, its stats are crazy. Very, very good light cone. If you have it for Kafka, then this is going to be your best, no doubt. But for the vast majority of us, I'm sure we do not have a Kafka light cone. What is going to be your next best? Well, you have a couple options. The other 5-star Nihility one on the standard banner isn't too bad. It's pretty nice. It increases your damage and increases your attack, which is pretty good, as well as the effect hit rate. And while its passive here is pretty solid, I would say you're mostly using this for the raw stats that it has as a 5-star. It definitely has a bit more stats, so it is quite solid. It'll bolster up that attack quite a bit more. So that's why it's a pretty good option. But your next best in the 4-star category is likely going to be Good Night and Sleep Well. For every debuff the target enemy has, the damage dealt by the wearer increases by 12%, stacking up to 3 times. This effect also applies the damage over time. This is a very, very good light cone, especially if you have it at some refinements. That'll go up to 24%, and it's got some solid attack here. This is likely your next best option for a 4-star light cone, and likely the best 4-star light cone for your Kafka, and the one I would recommend. But as you can see, I don't have it, so what am I using? Well, the next best one after that, in my opinion, is easily going to be Fermata here. I know, shocker, it has Kafka on the light cone, so yes, it is quite solid on her. It increases her break effect, which I think is really slept on. You don't necessarily want to run break effect in the main stats for Kafka, as it's just not as optimal as running like attack or something for her actual damage over times, but getting break effect from a light cone and your substats is going to be increasing that damage, and with the amount of follow-up attacks that she's going to be doing and the amount of speed that she has, there's some good odds that she's going to be the one that actually breaks a shield, allowing her to deal some more damage there. But not only that, of course, this increases the damage to enemies afflicted with shock or wind shear by 16%, and you're pretty much going to have one of those at any given time while Kafka's on your team. And as you, of course, are able to refine this, then you are going to get even more damage there. Not to mention that this is a very free-to-play friendly one, as this is available from the Memory of Chaos shop, or the Forgotten Hall shop, or whatever it's called. So you can get the refinements for these much easier than you can a lot of the others that you have to rely on gacha for. So this is my next best pick in the 4-star category for light cones. But if you have none of those that I've mentioned so far, the Sampo one is actually quite good. It increases your effect hit rate and increases your damage over time by 24%, which is pretty good. Of course, as you refine that, then you get even more, and it, you know, pops off. This is a very good light cone for Kafka as well. I'd put it on the same level as Fermata, but of course getting these superimpositions for this is going to be significantly harder, and not to mention when you're running Kafka, you're often going to kind of want to run Sampo because he's a very good damage over time character too, and if that's the case, you might want to have this on Sampo because it's a very good Sampo light cone. You know, it's got him on it. I wonder why it's good for him. So a lot of the times I think it's just better to go Fermata for your Kafka and then have Eyes of Prey on your actual Sampo. But either one is good, as neither of them are as good as Good Night and Sleep Well or her custom Patience is All You Need light cone. So you do have a lot of options there. All of the other options here I don't think are too good for Kafka specifically. You could definitely make some of them work, but with the free-to-playness of Fermata, I really wouldn't try to, as I think that just ends up being better. Moving on to relics, and realistically for your main relic set for Kafka, you're going to want the full thunder set, the Band of Sizzling Thunder. It increases your lightning damage, which yes, does contribute to your damage over time damage there, as well as increases your attack, which your attack of course contributes to your damage over time as well. Is a very good set, but a lot of us are struggling in the relic department. Believe me, I know how you feel. So you do have some other options here. Of course, you could run like a 4-piece Musketeer of the Wild Wheat to increase your attack and your speed a little bit, but you could also easily split that up between a 2-piece of this and a 2-piece of the Messenger Traversing Hackerspace one that also increases your speed by 6% there. So if you just have really good substats on like a split set of that and you're still missing a bunch of main stats on the lightning set, then I'd personally go for the split set for a while until you can farm out a good 4-piece of the lightning set here. As for your ball and rope set, the overall best option for Kafka is going to be the Space Ceiling Station, as this increases your attack by 12%, and then when you have more speed, it increases by an extra 12%, and you're going to be meeting that speed threshold because speed is very important on Kafka. So this is essentially a free 24% attack, and that's going to be contributing to your overall damage over time damage, and it's quite good. But of course, if you don't have this, you actually don't really need this set in particular. This is definitely the best one in my opinion, but if you've already got really good substats on something like the Fleet of the Ageless, then this is a really good option as well, because it increases your max HP by 12%, but we don't care about that. But it also increases all allies attack by 8%, which is very good because when you're running Kafka, you're likely running other damage over time units, and this is going to be contributing to their damage over time as well. So you don't get as much attack as you would from something like the Space Ceiling Station, but it is being split across all of your units, which is very valuable, and this stacks. So if you have other units with this on, then you can all receive that benefit. So that's very good, and I really wouldn't knock this. This isn't a bad set, and if you just can't farm this out and you're just unlucky, then I would say this is easily your next best alternative, and there's really nothing wrong with going with it. Now, some of you might be asking why not use Pan-Galactic Commercial Enterprise or something that increases your effect hit rate by 10%, meanwhile the wearer's attack increases by an amount that is equal to the current effect hit rate up to a maximum of 25%. This is super unnecessary. All of her base chances for actual effects is already 100%, so you really don't need effect hit rate on her. And any sort of resistances that you'll encounter, you can likely overcome with just a few substats here or there. So I really don't think it's worth it to invest into this, as it's just not that great on her, and could easily be used better on other units like Sampo or somebody like Silverwolf or something. I just really don't think it's that great on Kafka. So that's the sets, but what about the actual stats? Well, for Kafka, on the chess piece, you are going to want attack percentage, no question here. You can run crit rate if you're feeling spicy and you really want to see the big numbers on her, but if you want that damage over time to be popping off as hard as it possibly can, then you're going to want an attack percentage main stat on the chess piece here. Speed on the boots, no question. You can run attack here if you just can't get the speed, but you will want speed. I did mention how extremely valuable speed is on Kafka. The faster she goes, the more damage over time you're going to be able to do, so speed is highly important to have on her. But as an interim, of course, you can run that attack percentage. Same with the ball. Lightning damage boost is going to be the best. As we mentioned, it does help your damage over time, so lightning damage is going to be the best ball here, but if you just can't get one, attack percentage is fine as an interim piece. And then for the rope, attack percentage is no doubt the best here, as it's just going to be increasing that damage over time. A lot of people are asking if break effect is a good idea here. It's very okay. I really wouldn't recommend it. I think break effect is much better left in the substat category than a main stat category. I understand how you feel. Break effect is very nice, especially when you break that shield and you see the big damage number, but believe me, attack percentage is just going to be better here for your damage over time, as it just works better with her overall anyway. So I really recommend attack percent here as well. Now for substats, for those of us who actually do get some decent substats, what are you looking for in the substat department? Well, as I said, speed is immensely important for Kafka, so any speed substats you can get are extremely valuable. But not only that, break effect is very good, as I mentioned, and a little bit of effect hit rate is quite nice. You don't need to go all in on effect hit rate and get the best effect hit rate stats or anything, but a little bit here and there is going to help you overcome any resistances that you run into. So getting that on your substats is going to be key, but you don't need to go wild with it either. I would highly recommend speed and break effect be your top priorities, and if you can fit in some crit rate and crit damage damage, then why not? Personally, I like having a little bit of these crit rate substats on my Kafka. I've actually been getting weirdly lucky on crit rate specifically on my substats, and it allows her to have like I believe like I'm at like 30% crit rate, and that's all on substats. So my Kafka actually does crit somewhat often in a weird way, even though I'm not trying to crit with her at all. And I gotta say, it is quite nice because I'm still doing the whole damage over time thing, but then I crit every now and then. I'm like, oh cool, big number. So that's pretty nice as well, but I certainly wouldn't shoot or aim for that crit rate. As I said, speed and break effect are much better substats to go for. Same with effect hit rate, so you can actually overcome any of those resistances. But if you can squeeze in some crit rate in there, then you know, why not? Now, for Kafka teams, surprisingly enough, her actual banner, the characters that are on them, are very, very good for her teams. Sampo and Luca are some of the best pairings for Kafka. Sampo, because of course he increases damage over time, affects damage, and applies a really healthy amount of wind shear. Luca has impressed me a ton. I don't even have him leveled up all the way, and he's been impressing me a ton already. The amount of bleed that he's able to activate, as well as the fact that he wants to use his normal attack every now and then, which is very nice for your rotation when you actually need to heal with Bailu, and then you can still get your Kafka talent to proc. This is a very sweet team. Now, of course, it is fairly squishy, which is probably its biggest problem, but the damage over time applied here is actually insane, especially with the bleed that Luca applies, because his bleed actually scales off the enemy's max HP. It's like 24% of their max HP, but it does have a cap that is related to his actual attack percentage. You can read that in his kit. I'll probably do a guide for him as well to go over that. But essentially, yeah, he allows you to do percentages of their HP, and Kafka and Sampo are only going to accelerate the amount of damage that that does. So these guys are a really good squad together. And of course, last character will just be a healer. I particularly really like Bailu here over any of the others. Other than Lucha is just kind of crazy, especially his skill point economy is super crazy because this is a pretty skill point hungry team. But Bailu in particular, I do like here as a substitute for Lucha, just because she can revive one of these guys as they're pretty squishy. So you might get unlucky and somebody might get focused down, and Bailu can really save you there. You do have some other damage over time options though. Asta is actually a very, very good one. Her normal attack applies burn, and you're often not really going to be using her skill too much. And on top of that, her elemental burst increases the party speed, which, as we mentioned, is very, very good on Kafka. So Asta actually pairs extremely well with Kafka. Something like Kafka, Asta, and Luca, or maybe Sampo or something, is a very, very good damage over time, 3 to use. Serval also does a lot of damage over time mechanics. I don't think she's as good. Erudition characters do seem to be struggling in the damage department overall. Not to mention that you can't really invest as heavily into damage over time on Serval because you do care about things like crit rate and crit damage on her, so you can't really invest super hard into the attack percentage. So that does hurt a little bit, but she still is a solid choice with Kafka. Not to mention that these two are also free to play entirely. So if you get Kafka and you just started the game, you pretty much have these characters already, and that's a solid damage over time squad regardless. So really not a bad option. And while the Nihility and dot play style is a ton of fun on Kafka, I do want to say do not feel pigeonholed into using all of these dot characters or Nihility characters or something, as there are plenty of other characters that pair really well with Kafka in ways that you might not expect. Tingyun, of course, being amazing for Kafka. She increases Kafka's attack, therefore increasing the damage over time, and also regenerates her energy, allowing you to activate those damage over times via Kafka's burst more often. Tingyun is an amazing pairing for Kafka. They go really well together. And one that actually surprised me as being a pretty good pairing with Kafka as well is Blade. Kafka and Blade are actually quite nice. I guess it fits because they're on the same team, but they're quite nice because Blade is often going to be the one breaking a shield or something, because he just does really solid damage across a whole swath of characters. And when he does, get that break effect or that breaking shield, he's going to apply wind shear, which is still going to be contributing to the damage over time for Kafka. And not to mention that he works off of doing his normal attacks, meaning that Kafka is always going to be following him up with her talent there. So they're actually a pretty darn good pairing. He's getting that wind shear, even though it's not really a essential part of his kit or anything. And Kafka is always going to be following him up on his attacks. I actually really like these two together. So he can be a good primary damage source in a team, while Kafka is a very good supplement for the damage over time there. I really like these two. And one that might surprise you is, well, the main character, the preservation main character. Yeah, let me explain this one. Pretty much this goes for most preservation characters. I'm doing the main character here because she just happens to be fire and you can apply the burning via break effect. But the key element to this, and why I think she's actually low-key pretty good with Kafka as well as any other really real preservation character, is the light cone trend of the universal market. If you have this light cone, you can make a preservation character contribute pretty heavily to your damage over time gameplay style. As trend of the universal market increases your defense for your preservation character, but it also, when the wearer is attacked, there is a 100% base chance to burn the enemy for each turn. The wearer deals damage over time that is equal to 40% of the wearer's defense for 2 turns. So if you apply this to the main character and you use the main character's taunt where they are going to attack her, then you're applying a burn for free, and not to mention the main character is very good at breaking shields and applying that burn. So if you feel your damage over time teams are too squishy or something, use the main character if you have trend of the universal market, because then you can get some free burn on top of that while still protecting your teammates. I think this is a really underestimated teammate for Kafka. I haven't really seen this. A lot of people talk about this, and I think it is a very solid pairing for her. You do still have even more options than that. Kafka is honestly one of the most flexible units that we've gotten. One of the more interesting ones, in my opinion, is going to be Hook. Hook applies burn quite often, so if you want that damaging character on your team alongside your damage over time, Hook is a really good option. She's very good at applying burn, and she deals more damage to characters when they actually have that burn going, so she pairs pretty solidly with Kafka. And just one more honorable mention for a decent pairing with Kafka is going to be somebody like Su Shang. I don't think she's that great. She doesn't apply bleed or anything really on her own, but she does get a lot of turns via her elemental burst mechanic and is often going to be the one breaking shields because of it. So she will be applying bleed that way. So I think she's a decent choice overall. I don't think she's the best choice. I think we had mentioned a lot of other better choices before Su Shang here. So she's just kind of like an honorable mention, but I still wanted to mention her. Overall, going forward, I think one of my favorite looking Kafka teams is likely going to be something like Kafka, Luca, the main character, or Sampo, and then Bailu or, Locha if he ever comes back, or we get another better healer or something. But hopefully through talking about this, you understand just how flexible she actually is. Her damage on her own is quite solid, and she actually has quite flexible team pairings, and that's really what I wanted to demonstrate here in this sort of team building section. But that is going to be about it for the video. Hopefully this helped you build your Kafka, and hopefully gave you some good ideas on how to build your teams for Kafka, because they are far more flexible than I ever thought they were going to be, and I really, really like her kit. She surprised me on every level. I thought she was just going to be the damage over time queen, and while she is, she seems far more flexible than that and far more useful going forward as we get more and more characters. I think she'll have a place in longevity, as her kit is really flexible and I really like it. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. How are you guys liking Kafka? Did you get her? What kind of teams are you using for her, and how much are you enjoying the newly unlocked playstyle of damage over time? But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.